Welcome into Jungle Tales, the Pirate Baseball Podcast, episode 11, as we're coming to you here on MLK January the 20th. Hard to believe that we are just 3.5 weeks from opening day for Division I baseball, and I guess a week and a half for the non-D1 ranks in Division II getting cranked up on January 31st with their first games of the 2025 season. And right now, very excited to be joined by the host of the Road to Omaha Podcast, a podcast that was, launched here in the last year or so by a guy that's no stranger to East Carolina fans. However, it was on the opposing side. He began his career at Elon, then played a couple years for the Cincinnati Bearcats, played a total of 19 games again against East Carolina, and that is JP Sponseller. JP, we appreciate your time.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me on. Pumped.
Yeah, always look forward to talking college baseball, specifically East Carolina baseball. And I know we connected several months back and discussed doing a podcast, and I thought it would be good to wait when we're right here on the doorstep of the season. So for people that aren't familiar with you and your podcast, just give people the Cliff Notes version, and then we'll dive into your background. I know you're born and raised in the Cincinnati area. Growing up right outside of Cincinnati, a heck of a high school player there before deciding to play at Elon, and we'll dive all into that here in just a moment. But just tell folks a little about yourself.
Yeah, so the podcast-wise, I actually started it. We started it in January of 2024. It was me and my two older brothers who we all played college sports. So we started off as just kind of a sports podcast. We had people from a bunch of different sports, all different levels. And then as those two got a little busier in their schedules, my one middle brother coaches high school football, so started to get pretty busy with that. I decided I enjoyed it, wanted to keep it going. Obviously, I have a little bit, not a ton, but a little bit more credibility in the college baseball world, and that seemed to be where we got a decent amount of traction. So decided I wanted to keep it going and transfer it over to strictly college baseball. So we'll talk everything college baseball, some players, some coach interviews. I am going to give out some betting picks throughout the season, so looking forward to doing that and keeping track of that. But yeah.
Nice. Definitely we'll keep an eye on that. I know, I guess originally, kind of like myself, and the podcast was just audio only, and now I noticed you have some content up on YouTube as well.
Yeah, just kicked up the YouTube. Obviously, when we first started it, we didn't know if it made a whole lot of sense, if people would want to watch like a 30 to 45-minute Zoom call, just because we couldn't get in person in studio. So I got a couple requests that people wanted to watch it. Just figured it's another platform to reach people on. I've also thought about making like some weekend videos. If I go and travel for a weekend series, I'll do a little like vlog, something like that. So just another place I could put that stuff up.
Absolutely. That's something that I do with Jungle Tales, the sights and sounds from Clark LeClaire or, wherever the Pirates happen to be that I'm attending. And, those have gone over very well through the years. And, last year, the ones of the Greenville Regional definitely will receive several hundred or more views. Just folks who can't get to their regional and doing what they can to see what the atmosphere was truly like instead of just the broadcast on television.
Yeah, I mean they had you guys had some early games too. You had some people taking off work for those.
Yeah, that's something that, as you know, with Pirate Nation, very loyal baseball fan base, and certainly, as Coach Godwin has said, well, we've been spoiled over the last several seasons, and it got used to, with the exception of 2023, hosting regionals on an annual basis going back to 2018. And as a result, a lot of folks, make it a point to save some vacation time for the end of May and early June.
Yeah.
But kind of going back to that childhood that I referenced and was in the greater Cincinnati area, in addition to baseball, what other sports did you play? You were a Reds fan, obviously, a long storied or much storied franchise with a pretty rich history, Pete Rose and so on. But what was your childhood like growing up there in the Cincinnati area, and what else did you play in addition to baseball?
Yeah, so Cincinnati in general is just a huge sports town. I feel like it's pretty similar across the Midwest. If you got your pro and college sports teams in town, that's a lot of what there is to do for the most part is get behind those. Me and my two older brothers, we played all three sports growing up: baseball, basketball, and football. My dad was definitely more of a baseball guy. Didn't play in college, but his dad actually played college baseball at Ohio University, and obviously they got to grow up like you were talking about when the Reds were really good. My grandpa and dad were huge Pete Rose guys, so that was kind of all that history was instilled in me at a very young age. Me and my oldest brother went on to focus on baseball, and my middle brother went on to play college football at Cincinnati. And feel like we all kind of focused up on one sport, I'd say around freshman year of high school. So I played football through my freshman year, and then my sophomore year was the first year I decided to focus on baseball. But growing up, it was really if I wasn't playing one sport, I was playing the other, and my source of entertainment was doing it in the backyard or in the driveway playing hoops. So a lot of sports.
Yeah, I was too young to remember Pete Rose as a player. He and Johnny Bench and some of those guys. But my childhood, growing up as an Atlanta Braves fan, I have a lot of memories of the likes of Eric Davis. Rob Dibble, Norm Charlton, and as they called them, the Nasty Boys.
Yep, the Nasty Boys.
But I've had the opportunity to attend, or before it was, of course, torn down, imploded, or whatnot. The old Riverfront Stadium, had a chance to see the Reds play.
Yep.
Barry Bonds and the Giants there back in the early 2000s, and then also I've been to, I think, at least 2, maybe 3 or 4 games at the Great American Ballpark, which is extremely nice.
Yeah, I feel like it's a little bit underrated. I mean, I don't describe it to people as it would knock their socks off, but I think a lot of people that show up with little expectations are pleasantly surprised. It's a good place to watch a game.
Kind of transitioning back to your career. I know you said it was there early in high school that you started to hone in on baseball and specialize, if you will. And you, of course, had that history with your family in the Bearcats. You were, I believe I read, player of the year in the city of Cincinnati, in that area.
Yep.
Coming out of high school. So tell us about your opportunities before you decided to travel south down here to my neck of the woods and the Piedmont region and be a member of the Elon Phoenix program for a couple years.
Yeah, so I committed really early on. I committed right before my sophomore season of high school baseball. It was kind of deal where my dad had obviously gone through the recruiting process with my 2 older brothers already, and we were really at that point is when I started talking to some schools, and we weren't really thinking of trying to collect as many offers as possible and that whole deal. We really just wanted to find a good fit somewhere where I felt valued and where I could get on the field pretty early and play. I'd always grown up kind of wanting to go to a bigger school. Now, obviously, this is also before the transfer portal opened, so it wasn't even a thought of that I'm going to move schools. So it was kind of like when you commit, this is it. And Yeah, Elon gave me a great opportunity. There were a couple other bigger schools that I was talking to, Purdue, West Virginia, Cincinnati. And it was kind of that time where those schools started recruiting, not all of them, but the bigger schools would bring in like 50, 60 guys. And then you got to cut 20 at the end of the fall. And I just knew how baseball goes and didn't want to put myself in that situation to where if I have a bad fall or something, I'm heading to a JUCO or somewhere else. So love the opportunity I got at Elon. Obviously, I think they play in a pretty good conference. The CAA is very competitive. And then out of conference, obviously, we're bouncing around to ECU, UNC. Great out of conference schedule. A lot of scouts in the area. You'll get seen if you're good enough. And love the staff and love the school, and decided that's where I wanted to play.
Yeah, Coach Mike Kennedy, tied with Elliott Avent for the longest tenured coach within the state of North Carolina that has 17 or 18 Division I college baseball programs. Very remarkable. But as you mentioned, yes, the CAA, very strong. Of course, UNC Wilmington, a rival of East Carolina's. The Pirates and Elon, as you know, typically play home and home annually. And, long tradition there between the Pirates and the Phoenix. And, with the CAA, it's only gotten stronger because they brought Campbell into the fold.
Yep. I never got the chance to play against Campbell.
Right.
Obviously, we had James Madison leave, which was they just continued to get better and better as that school keeps growing. But UNC Wilmington, College of Charleston had some great teams. It was just a fun conference to play in. I mean, you're in the South for the most part, and get to play at some cool little schools with some cool parks, and it was good baseball.
Unfortunately, in that initial season of college baseball, I think for you was that 2020 campaign, correct?
Yep.
So I guess you got somewhere between 15 and 20 games in. I know East Carolina played 17 that year before things got shut down. And but before things got shut down, you had the chance to play the Pirates a couple of times. And your first ever trip to Clark LeClaire Stadium, you actually had a pinch hit AB in a single, a game that East Carolina went back and saw that the Pirates scored there in the middle innings to win something like 7-4. But what was your first impression of? And we'll dive more into. I think you played 7 games between your time at Elon and Cincinnati at Clark LeClaire Stadium.
Yeah, my first impression, I'll say that the first game we played them was actually at our place at Elon, and just then, like them showing up, they had their hack attacks, they had all their stuff ready to go, and it almost just seemed like it was a factory on the other side of the field, which is something that I hadn't really experienced before. And then heading down to Clark LeClaire, I will say my experiences at UC when we got to play there on the weekends were even more juiced, but going down there for a midweek and everyone's into the game. It was just an awesome atmosphere. And I got to play at North Carolina also earlier in that year. And I'll say just playing at UNC and ECU, those first couple weeks of my freshman year was just an awesome experience. It's just like what I've dreamed of growing up, wanting to play college baseball against great teams and great atmospheres. And I loved it.
And that's very remarkable. I mentioned 19 games against East Carolina. That has to, I'd like to know the most that any one team is in that period of time, because of the kind of quirkiness of the American Athletic Conference and playing a team 6 times like East Carolina did the Bearcats, and prior to UConn leaving the league, the Pirates and the Huskies were paired with one another.
Yeah, unfortunately, ECU was our buddy for a few years there, where we had to play them more times than anybody else. So it was a little bit unfortunate for us, considering they were at the top of the conference just about every year. It was a little unfortunate. I will say I think I'm 0-7 in the jungle, so not great. I was just going to bring up that intro is awesome, by the way. It gave me a little bit of PTSD, but all the sights and sounds, it was awesome.
Well, I appreciate that. And I know, obviously, outside of trying to win baseball games, just as a college baseball fan now, unless the Pirates are playing the Bearcats, I know you had such fond memories and thoughts of Clark LeClaire Stadium in the jungle that I think you may have even made it back last year, but you definitely have plans to make it back moving forward.
Yeah, I'd like to. That's one spot that's on my list that I got to experience as a fan, right? I mean, I spent so much time there, spent so much time playing against them, and unfortunately got it handed to me for most of the time. So I'd love to experience coming down there, tailgating, and being in the crowd as a fan.
Yeah, just let me know when you're making the trip, and I'll make sure Jared Plummer and the left field megaphone crew that you're well taken care of that day.
Yes, sir.
That day or two that you're there with some pirate beverages and plenty of barbecue and so forth.
Yeah, I'd love that. That sounds awesome.
So during those years as a Bearcat, like you said, it was a bit unfortunate that you had to play 6 games against East Carolina, but the Bearcats, made strides as a program. Coach Scott Googans, who had previously been, I guess, across town at Xavier and done a very good job leading that program to a super regional, I think, one year at Louisville. What were some of your fondest memories, outside of some of those matchups between the Pirates and Bearcats of your years in UC or at UC?
I will say the one time that we did get to beat ECU, that was awesome at home. We always, obviously those after the fact, I can say that it was unfortunate, but I mean, from our perspective before the year and from a competitor's perspective, I mean, the way we looked at it is we get to play the best team 6 times. So we get to prove our resume better than anybody else. So, I mean, it's not like we were tucking our tails before any of those games. It's just kind of how it all shook out. But love that win. And just, I don't know. I think the American Athletic Conference, I was kind of sad to see it change, as excited as I am about the Bearcats being in the Big 12. It was just such a competitive conference. I mean, throughout schools, and you get to travel all over, and it seemed like anybody could beat anybody on any given weekend. And so just going down to those series against UCF and Houston, it was just always super competitive. And on top of that, just being home and in front of some of the people that watched me play in high school and family and friends, just playing in the town of Cincinnati and wearing Cincinnati across my chest was a pleasure for sure.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, despite the Pirates' gaudy record against the Bearcats, those were games that I definitely never took for granted. Especially when we were playing in Cincinnati. I think back to that 2022 series. That was a heck of a series. I think ECU won that weekend 2-1, but you guys won Friday night.
And, yeah, I still think about that Sunday game.
And then the Pirates even the series on Saturday, and then the Sunday game was a very unusual game. It seems like in a lot of ways kind of a back and forth game that went extra innings and kind of propelled the Pirates to what would eventually be a 20-game win streak. I can't remember if that started it or not, but that was kind of the turnaround there, winning that weekend.
It was, because I'm pretty sure from the time they came up to us in Clifton, from the time we went down to Greenville, they had not lost a game yet. So it was, I think, around 13 or 14 games at that point. But fun fact about that Sunday game is actually Ben Terwilliger came in. He was forced to hit And I know he has some hitting experience in the past, but I think he may have hit a double off the wall against us and like knocked in an RBI with 2 outs. And that was kind of like the oh shit moment.
Yeah, I remember what ECU baseball put on their social media accounts, from that double off the wall that you mentioned by the rarely used bat of Ben Terwilliger. And like you said, he was recruited as a third baseman out of high school, and began his career as such for the Maine Black Bears, and that do have pretty good baseball program and history. But at the same time, he quickly made that transition to the mound. But he definitely, from that one pitch, got a hold of that one. We laughed about it. He was on episode 10, and I know that's probably why you brought that up. But yeah, Ben was laughing about it, and I referenced a video put on social media by ECU baseball and the program's official account, and it was shot from the dugout. I don't know if it was Jacob Jenkins Coward or someone you heard making a comment to one of the other teammates, whose bat Ben was using. Hey, he's going to break your bat. He's going to break your bat. About that time, boom.
Yeah, he smoked that ball too. It was not a cheap one.
And that was one I can imagine from your perspective. You're like, oh gosh, if this guy's doing this, then
it's one of those, after you play and watch baseball so many times, there's kind of certain things that may happen in a game where you can really feel the tide start to turn a little bit. And
right.
I'll say the pitcher hitting a double off the wall late in the game was definitely one of those for me.
But we actually had a question submitted, I believe it was by one of your former teammates there at UC, Sean Springer.
Yeah, I played with him for both my years at Cincinnati. He's a close friend.
Okay, and I believe he actually wrapped up his career a year ago. Is that right?
Yep.
And so he was on that initial squad in the Big 12, and I will dive more into the accomplishments of that team that was picked dead last and ended up fifth in the Big 12, which was very impressive in your new coach's initial season. But he asked, outside of Clark LeClaire and including Clark LeClaire, what were some of those top environments you played in during your career at Elon as well as at UC?
Yeah, so I got to say it's always a little bit different between atmosphere and favorite park for me. Like atmosphere, I still, and there's a lot of people that would agree with me. ECU is almost unmatched. I've never played at a place where the fan engagement and just the love for the game and ECU baseball, that's got to be the best atmosphere I played at. A second place for atmosphere, I got to say Florida. When I went down there in 2023, saw that new ballpark, and it was one of the first weekends, so they packed it out pretty good. And that was the year they went on to be the runner-up in the World Series. That was awesome. And then I don't know. I'm kind of a sucker for the smaller parks in the Carolinas I got to play at. I mean, I'll throw UNCW and College of Charleston in there too. It's, again, nothing that's going to blow your world, but you pull up to campus, you're playing baseball at the beach, great environment. And I loved playing at those places.
Yeah, Patriots Point down there at College of Charleston. Have not had the chance to see a game there, but the Pirates have played there on multiple occasions, and of course that war at the shore, if you will, in in-state battle with UNC Wilmington, playing at least 2 times annually, home and home, and this year actually playing 3 times, as there's a third game between the Pirates and Seahawks at Segra Stadium, the home of the Low A Fayetteville Woodpeckers. And so that's always great for the RPI and those matchups with the Seahawks.
Oh yeah. I will say I'll throw in North Carolina too. Was it's a great stadium. Obviously, I played there on midweeks and never on the weekends, so I didn't get the full atmosphere. But I feel like I could say this because we're on an ECU podcast. Me and my dad always kind of described North Carolina as the wine and cheese crowd, opposed to heading down to Greenville. So it's a little bit different atmosphere.
Yeah, definitely different atmospheres. I will say that it has improved significantly in recent years as far as their support of their baseball program. Honestly, back in that, I guess, early to mid 2000s run that they had under Mike Fox, where they were pretty much going to Omaha annually. Back when it was the CWS was at Rosenblatt.
Yep.
During those years, outside of postseason play, the Tar Heel fans did not show up nearly as well as they do now for some of those bigger conference series, and still not necessarily a raucous atmosphere, but it is more well attended than it once was. Other than Florida, I know you said you had the chance to play in Condon Ballpark. Did you go to any other SEC venues?
No, that was the only SEC team I ever played. I will say, just as far as within the American too, like UCF was another cool one. Unfortunately, we played there when the students weren't in town. But other than those North Carolina schools, I'd say Florida was really the only big time school I ever got to travel to.
I mentioned Omaha. I'm kind of going back to your childhood. I know you said you had the luxury and opportunity. You were playing with some baseball out in the Omaha area, if not specifically in Omaha, and you guys had the opportunity to get to Rosenblatt Stadium before it became a thing of the past.
Yeah, it was my middle brother was actually out there for a tournament, and me and my oldest brother Lee, who were more of the baseball guys in the family. I think we actually skipped one of his games to head over to Rosenblatt one day, and I mean, it's very different than if you go out there now. It's actually not called TD Ameritrade anymore, is it? It's
I believe it's still Charles Schwab. I mean,
yeah,
yep. I don't think it's changed once again. I think it's Charles Schwab, and it should be for at least a few years.
Okay. But yeah, we went over there, and it was back in the day where I believe we bought a ticket, and it was kind of first come, first entry into the ballpark for those sections for like the whole outfield. So, I mean, we waited in line outside the stadium for about 3.5 hours. Finally got in, and we were front row in the outfield to watch Trevor Bauer and UCLA play against Florida. So, I mean, that was just an unbelievable experience that definitely kind of sparked that dream of mine to, I mean, obviously a lot of people got the dream of playing in the big leagues, but I mean, growing up, I just really wanted to play college baseball. I mean, I still love college baseball. Obviously it's why I'm doing some of this stuff, but yeah, just an unbelievable atmosphere. And I will say from going out to the new park, it had more of the college baseball feel than this new one does. Obviously, the game's changed and grown so much. And Charles Schwab, you go there, it's more of a big league or minor league type ballpark atmosphere. And yeah, Rosenblatt was it was special. It was you felt like you were in a college stadium that was just absolutely packed, opposed to a minor league park. So it was a great experience.
And that was that 2010 CWS. You had the opportunity to see Trevor Bauer. I think he went about 7 that day. I was looking up the results of that game, but went 7 innings and struck out probably close to 10 batters, and obviously it's no secret what he did in the big leagues. And I remember, I guess, when he and Garrett Cole were at UCLA a couple years earlier. The Pirates played them, I think both in LA or Westwood, and then also at Clark LeClaire for a 3-game series.
Okay. Yeah. I was 9 years old at the time, and that was before social media and all this stuff. So I didn't even know who Trevor Bauer was until after the fact, but
right. And I know we discussed off the air how Rosenblatt was kind of like the Wrigley Field or Fenway Park of college baseball. And the way you describe it, and it seems like that certainly was the case for someone who, and myself, had never been there.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was just like more of it wasn't right in downtown Omaha, so it was more of just like, if I remember correctly, it was almost in the middle of like some neighborhoods, and then you got this awesome complex, and it was the last year of Rosenblatt when I was there, so there was definitely a lot of energy and love and media just about the ballpark, and yeah, it was awesome, man. I secretly wish they still played it there, and it was more of the small town college baseball type atmosphere. But yeah, the new place is awesome too. It's just a little different.
Hard to believe that that's nearly 15 years in the past as far as Rosenblatt Stadium, and since the CWS moved downtown to TD Ameritrade, now Charles Schwab, and I just think back to all those memories watching the CWS back when the College World Series was the primary college baseball on TV. You didn't have the regionals and super regionals on TV for a long time, and very few regular season games were televised. And you'd have an ACC game of the week or something of that nature. Same for the SEC, but the exposure and the way it's increased over the last couple of decades for college baseball has just been awesome. And some of those fond memories of my childhood, watching Skip Bertman and those LSU teams that just were made up of one slugger after another. And then you think of, when Warren Morris had his moment against Miami in that championship game.
Yep.
He wasn't a home run hitter, but Omaha and Rosenblatt Stadium in the College World Series had its way of producing those magical moments.
Yeah, and I think it still does for sure.
Definitely.
But no, to go back to your point, I mean, it's exciting how much the game has changed and evolved and grown, and I certainly am trying to contribute to that. I'm sure that's why you do a lot of this stuff too. The kids deserve it, man. Like they put in time, just as much time as these football and basketball players. And obviously when we were growing up, that it didn't even get close to the exposure that those sports did. But I feel like, and they're still not making nearly as much money as those programs, but definitely headed in a great direction. And I'm excited to see how much this thing grows.
Talking about some of those bucket list venues, I know you mentioned some of the ones you played in, but there's so many. The SEC, or what used to be the SEC West, there's no longer divisions, but LSU, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, just loaded with tremendous college baseball atmospheres. And Swayze Field, the new Alex Box. I would have loved to have the opportunity to go to the old Alex Box. East Carolina was actually a number one seed at LSU back in 1999 before we had the ballpark to host, and failed to submit a bid to host off campus. And needless to say, the new dude, as they say, Duty Noble. And I saw here recently, as I'm sure you may have as well on social media, some old videos from the mid 80s back in the Will Clark and Rafael Palmeiro days at the old Duty Noble. Just crazy. Some of the, for lack of a better word, contraptions you had in left field, with many decks and so forth on the back of trucks.
Yeah, I gotta say that is probably number one on my list, especially since I'm trying to make it this season. My best friend growing up, played high school with him. You actually might remember the name, Joe Powell. He caught for the Bearcats for 3 years before he. It's actually a really cool story for college baseball fans if you're interested. Took a year off, and actually was in fire school preparing to be a firefighter, thought he was done playing, and got the opportunity to go down to Mississippi State. And he was one of their catchers last year, and this will be his final year for the Bulldogs and final year in college baseball. So I'm definitely trying to get there this year at some point to see a game at the Dude.
Yeah, my dad had the opportunity to get down there. East Carolina made a spring break trip to the state of Mississippi, played a game in Oxford and a game in Starkville here just a few seasons ago, and nearly saw Jake Kuchmaner throw a no hitter against the Rebels, and saw the Pirates lose a low scoring game to Mississippi State. That may have even been, I'm not sure, that may have been the year when the Dogs won it all.
It might have been. You might be right. But now, Cooch is obviously playing against these guys so many times. I've gotten to know a few of them, and Cooch is one of my favorites. He's a great dude, man.
Yeah, and he has since become a coach, and also does some lessons in the Greenville area, and I'm sure you're aware of the perfect game that he threw later that season, just a week or two later, against the Maryland Terrapins up at Maryland. And my dad and a few of his buddies had a chance to be at that game. So it was remarkable that they nearly saw him throw an Ole Miss no-hitter and then won a perfect game just a couple weeks later.
Yeah, it sounds like he was their good luck charm. He needs to show up every time. They need to show up every time he was on the mound.
Yeah, I think that's what Cooch may have even said when he got a picture with him after the Maryland perfect game. But yeah, Cooch was that kind of that stereotypical lefty, not extremely hard throwing, but heck of a pitcher.
Oh yeah, yep.
But you talk about another one that is definitely high on my bucket list is Baum Walker at Arkansas. You look at the transformation of that ballpark over the last 20 or 30 years. It was pretty crazy to see it with the old carpet AstroTurf, and then see what it is here today in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many parks that I'd love to see a game at some point. Obviously, I mentioned that I didn't get to play at a ton of those, and obviously I'm out in Colorado now, so the travel was a little bit tougher to make it out there. I drove to Provo, Utah to watch the Bearcats play against BYU last season, and I will say the backdrop of that park, I forgot that I didn't mention it, I think just because we were talking about ones I played at, but that place is unbelievable as well.
It definitely is, and that's one I saw here recently. I mean, certainly familiar with it before, but some college baseball site on social media had put out their top 10 college baseball backdrops, regardless of divisions. I mean, some of these were D2 and D3 programs. Like there's one in the Northeast that had a unbelievable bridge in the background. I think it was in New York City or New Jersey.
And yeah, it might be. I think Manhattan actually.
Okay.
The Jaspers, I think they have a pretty cool backdrop. You get to see like a lot of New York City.
And then, of course, Georgia Tech was one with downtown Atlanta in the background, right there in center field. And yeah, BYU is definitely one that you'd love to go to. My parents have made that trip a couple times when the Pirates have played football there against the Cougs. And another one that's kind of underrated, not necessarily because of the setting, but it's a very tough place to play, and that is Texas Tech. ECU experienced that in the 2016 Super Regional.
Yeah, that is. I've heard Lubbock is awesome. I've heard it's just a very tough place to get to, and I guess it's similar to ECU, but even more challenging. Like I remember, we didn't charter fly in, so we'd have to fly into Raleigh and bus down to Greenville. So I've heard Lubbock's pretty similar. Unless you're on a flying into Lubbock, you got at least a 2-hour bus ride to get down there.
Yeah, and we actually have some of our viewers chiming in here on YouTube. Nate Gamender said at Ole Miss, there at Swayze, he said, talking about that initial at bat of the 2017 season, which unfortunately was a pretty forgettable season for the Pirates, but one that propelled the program to where it is today with the hardships of that year. But Dwanye Williams Sutton, you can probably remember that name. He drilled the first pitch. He said the first pitch over the left field wall. It was actually like the 11th pitch of that AB as he got into a 2-strike count and fouled off something like 7 or 8 pitches before delivering a 400-foot plus home run, first AB of the season. Unbelievable and definitely a very memorable moment.
Yeah, that sounds like a model ECU at bat to me.
Yeah, and Nate also had said, yeah, that was funny you bringing up Ben Terwilliger since Ben was our guest on episode 10. John White, a former Pirate pitcher from the early 90s, said even in 1989 that Florida, of course, is a different ballpark, as Condon Ballpark is no more than probably like 5 to 7 years old, if I had to guess. But back in those days, that their park was impressive, and it was very awe-inspiring to see their facilities. You can't even imagine what one of the new ballpark's like.
Yeah, that place it's awesome. I mean, as far as just upgraded facilities, it was definitely top notch, coolest one I played at, and you get the Gator Chomp going, and it's just they were a little different because it's a team you grew up watching in football so much too. Like there's just so much history in that school, and it was an awesome experience.
So kind of fast forwarding to this season, in present day, we'll talk about your Bearcats. Last year, beginning of a new era in a couple of different ways, a new coach, and then also transitioning to the Big 12 conference. Picked dead last, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, but then finished 5th in the league and won 30-plus games for the first time since 2019. What's your take on the new direction of Bearcat baseball?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for it. Obviously, I'd be lying to you if I told you I expected them to finish 5th. I didn't know how it was going to go that first year. Obviously, with a new coach and a lot of new players, you don't know how that's going to go. It could go really good. It could go really bad. But no, Coach Bischel did a great job coming in. Seems like he's really starting to develop his own culture there, and I know it was a little bit different than when I was playing, and even the current players that I was still buddies with, you got to see them kind of continue to buy in throughout the year, and it was really cool to see from my perspective, and just watching how well they competed in every game, man. Like they never turned it off. They played really hard. They competed against everybody, and opened up some eyes last year, and I'm really excited about where it's going.
And one of the things that really impressed me, I mean, that was a heck of a hire, because you're getting a proven head coach that had won like 8 conference championships or something before arriving to UC.
Yep. So he was, I believe his first head coaching job was at Northwood at the Division II level, was extremely successful there, and then was at Central Michigan for a good bit. And obviously they had made their way in a few regionals and had some really good teams. I think one thing that really stuck out is he really likes to run the base. It's similar a little bit to ECU, where he likes to put pressure on the defense, bunt, run the bases really well. And I guess when you look at levels of baseball, I didn't know how well that was all going to translate to playing in the Big 12. Obviously, when you feel like guys can command the zone on the mound a little better, they're going to be giving up less walks, and they're not going to throw the ball down the right field line on a bunt. But I was shocked at how well they applied the pressure on those defenses. And had great results. I mean, they stole a ton of bases. They had the defense making errors, and they were running around, and then they could also swing it a little bit. So it was fun to watch.
Coming from someone from an opposing perspective like yours, you talk about how East Carolina likes to play, especially on the offensive side with the fake bunts and steals and slashing and so forth. There's definitely multiple ways to skin a cat, and certainly no one can argue with the results. Personally, I like it, and I know a lot of other Pirate fans do as well. But then there are also certainly those Pirate fans that get frustrated by some of the bunting and fake bunting and so forth, and the small ball approach. And I like it, and then just because I know the way it puts the pressure on the defense. Whether you have a guy like a Riley Johnson that you're expecting it from to a degree, and then you could have a guy like Jacob Jenkins Cowart that can lay it down, very well also, and something you're not expecting, and just the versatility, to have a guy like a JJC or some of your other more potent bats that can surprise the defense and lay down a squeeze bunt or what have you.
Yeah, I mean the thing about ECU is they were just incredibly disciplined in all assets of the game. I mean, I go back to it was, and I obviously lost plenty of games to ECU. I also, if you were watching, a lot of those games at both Elon and Cincinnati were very competitive for, I'd say, 5 to 6 innings, and then really the breaking point is that we would always end up with more walks and more errors than they did. And I mean, they put pressure on you, and you give them free bases, and they're going to find a way to scratch them through. And it was always a very difficult team to play against, where like there was not going to be any free outs in that lineup. You had to earn every out, and I know that's something that Coach Godwin puts an emphasis on, and it really shows with how disciplined they are in their at-bats.
And something I've always told people about that approach is, I've seen innings, on several occasions where the Pirates have put up a very large crooked number, 5-6 run innings or more, where it all started, because of the small ball, where you've used the bunts to combine with some free passes to load the bases and plate 2 or 3 runs, and then all of a sudden you have that one big double or home run where you put up a 6 or 7 run inning and you've hit 1 or 2 balls out of the infield, and just how demoralizing that is for the opposition.
Oh, totally. And I mean, you got to think from the pitcher's perspective, and this is another great thing that Coach Godwin does a really good job of on the opposing side, is you give up a walk or two and then a bunt, and someone throws it down the line and you're all pissed, and that's when you might give up another walk or the double or the big hit. And that's another thing that Coach Godwin, I'm sure some of the fans get annoyed sometimes with how many pitching changes there are and breaks in the game, as we would too at times. But I mean, he doesn't let them get to that point, right? Like if there's a walk and then an error or 2 walks or something, they're right out of there, and he's got a new pitcher in there. So just from that perspective too, it is demoralizing, and it's easy for the game to speed up on you real quick.
Definitely is, and that's something that like I said, I've just seen it time and again. Where it was demoralizing for the opposition, where the Pirates did something that wasn't something that would turn any heads, but you kept having tough AB after tough AB, and it turned into a big night offensively.
Yep, totally. I mean, they were, like I said, they really try to limit strikeouts, putting the ball in play. I know Godwin really gets on their ass if they're chasing out of the zone. That's a big thing. So, and it's also just the accountability from their end, right? Like a lot of teams say they want to do that and say they want to have an identity, but at the end of the day, if there's no accountability for the players holding them to that, then it's not really gonna show throughout your program. And I think it's pretty obvious that Coach Godwin holds them to a pretty high standard, and it shows. He gets everyone to buy in.
Yeah, certainly, and that's something I think. Perhaps it was maybe a television announcer, maybe it was just someone at the game, but heard someone here in the last year or two jokingly referring to Coach Godwin's play sheet there with all of his combinations of numbers for his various offensive situations and play calls, referring to it as the Waffle House menu.
Yeah, he always had that sheet in his back pocket. He's giving out numbers. He's got his system rolling over there.
But speaking of coaches, I know you actually did a specific podcast back in the summer talking about several of those changes. Of course, the one that jumps off the page was what Jim Schlossnagle did. Truth be told, prior to the CWS concluding with Tennessee taking on Texas A&M and that very awkward press conference. But Schloss moving from College Station to Austin, Michael Early briefly going to Austin before getting the job at A&M and opting to, of course, take that and have a chance to take over what's D1 baseball's number one program in the country entering 2025. You have UVA. They've just been so consistent for decades now under Brian O'Connor. South Carolina hiring Paul Maneri. But going back to, like I was saying, specifically those new coaches, Schlossnagle, Early, Maneri. You have Kevin Schnall at Coastal Carolina taking over for Gary Gilmore. What are your thoughts on a lot of these first-year coaches at their new institutions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. We got some big names with some new staffs rolling in. I'm pumped to watch the Aggies this year, man. I mean, watching how everything went down with Schloss moving to Texas and how they all vouched for Early to get the job and they all stayed and got out of the portal. I think they're going to be playing with some fire this year and a lot of energy. They obviously have all the talent you need, so I'm pumped to watch them. Obviously, the players love Early, or else you wouldn't have seen as much promotion to give him the job as you did. So I think they're going to play real hard for him. Pumped to see Maneri back in college baseball. Obviously, he's a legend, so we'll get to see how he transfers his talents to another spot in the SEC. That'll be fun to watch. Coach Gilmore moving on from Coastal Carolina, and you got Kevin Schnall, who was, he's been rated one of the best assistant baseball coaches in college baseball for the past decade or so, and he's a Coastal alum. He played for Coach Gilmore. He's got a lot of pride. If you know about Coach Gilmore, he's had some sickness in the past couple of years. So Kevin Schnall definitely had a huge role in that program, and I'm excited to see what he does at the helm. I don't think that's going to be one where there's going to be few changes, I believe, just because of how much he was already doing and how similarly he thinks to Coach Gilmore. I think he's really going to fit in right away there.
Yeah, no doubt. That was kind of I don't know if they had done it officially, but from afar, it seemed like you talk about his long association with that program. It seemed like a heir apparent coach in waiting type of situation.
Yeah, so my oldest brother Lee, he actually got to play his fifth year down at Coastal in 2018. So got to play for both of those guys, and I think it was pretty clear at that point that I think Coach Schnall could have gotten plenty of other head coaching job opportunities in the past few years, and he was sticking it out to be the head coach of the Chants. So pumped for him and pumped to see that.
And certainly, why wouldn't you? I mean, it's your alma mater. You have an unbelievable ballpark. obviously one of the top 5 conferences in America with the Sun Belt. A league that you have Troy this year's the preseason pick to win the Sun Belt and a top 25 choice of D1 baseball, and that league is one that I'm very familiar with because one of my best friends is the recruiting coordinator for App State, Britt Johnson. He and Kermit Smith and App State have definitely turned that program around in recent years, and that's been pretty impressive to see that done, period, but especially doing it in a league like the Sun Belt that has so many tradition-rich baseball programs, be it Coastal, Georgia Southern, Louisiana Lafayette, or just Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns, and a program that's consistently hosting regionals and even super regionals.
Yeah, that's a great conference, man. It's awesome to watch. I know my brother absolutely loved playing in it. It's similar, honestly, to when we've had some good years in the American, right? It's just there's so many teams with talent, and it's just really, really competitive from top to bottom.
I mentioned Troy. Obviously, you talk about how much you look forward to watching Michael Early and the Texas A&M Aggies and see how they handle that preseason #1 ranking, and if they turn into what everyone expects them to. How will Tony Vitello and the Tennessee Vols, bounce back? I say bounce back. Continue to win at such a high level, or will they be able to do so, with some of the losses they had? I know you were there last year, maybe not necessarily for the championship series, but how many games did you have the opportunity to see at the 2024 CWS, and was Tennessee one of those teams you had the chance to see play?
Yeah, I believe I went to 4 games, and the first one I saw was probably, honestly, my favorite one, and the best one was Florida State and Tennessee in that game 2, the night game. It was Christian Moore hit for the cycle. There was that controversial check swing call on Blake Burke, which he ropes a double the next pitch. Florida State got up early, and Tennessee bounced back, and that was just – I really think if Florida State gets out of that with a win, it's a whole different College World Series. I mean, I think they had the firepower to win it too. Obviously, it's tough to lose that first game, but that was probably my favorite one I went to.
And kind of going back to my comment a moment ago, certainly bounce back's not the best choice of words, but the point I was making is just here in recent history, be it Ole Miss, when they were a 3 seed and won it all. Mississippi State had also won it all recently, and then the next year did not make the tournament. And then LSU won it all, and then last year struggled a bit and were a 3 seed. I guess it was, or maybe perhaps they were 2, but they nonetheless national champions in recent history have not done all that well the following year.
Yeah, I mean, I know they're going to be a great team. They're going to have talent, right? I mean, I know the game's continued to evolve where no matter how many players are leaving your program, these kind of schools got the money and the NIL and the resources to just reload every year. So they're definitely going to have talent. And one thing about Tony V, I mean, you love or hate the guy. I personally, I could get behind him. I like him. His players love playing for him, and they're always going to play hard for him, which is, I mean, I think just a huge thing in coaching. And he's going to have a good squad. I can't promise that they'll be back in Omaha, but I would not be shocked at all.
Taking a look here on the screen at our Division I preseason top 25. This is from D1 Baseball. And we talked about the Aggies in preseason #1. Let's take a look at some of those West Coast teams. You have Oregon, making that transition to the Big Ten. Big Ten, is typically, probably there in the 6 to 8 range as far as conference and just where they are is from an RPI standpoint. And Oregon is the preseason favorite this year in the Big Ten. And of course, they played very well last year and came up just shy down in College Station.
Yeah, I think I actually had a buddy, Justin Casella, who transferred from Elon to Oregon. He was on that squad last year, and they had a really good team, really good arms, and I think they're going to make a nice transition into the Big Ten. The Big Ten, it's interesting. I would not be surprised if it continues to get better and better as the years go on, just because of the money that a lot of these teams have. I do have them finishing towards the top. I'm excited, though, for the new look at the Big Ten. I mean, you're throwing in UCLA, USC, who are both teams who have a lot of history that maybe had a down couple years. So look forward to seeing them maybe making a bounce back. You got Michigan, who they were obviously in the College World Series, have had some great teams in the past. So, yeah, I'd say that's one of the biggest toss-up conferences in my book. I'll be interested to see how that conference plays out this year.
And then you have a program like Oregon State that's won multiple national titles in baseball, and the Beavers, very intrigued to see now that I know technically they're still a member of the Pac-12, but I guess they're playing in what is the Big West or West Coast Conference. You look at some of those series that they have lined up, and it's very West Coast heavy, but a lot of programs that have a lot of tradition down through the years.
Yeah, I mean, since I've been in high school and since then, they've always had great teams, a bunch of big name players. I was fortunate enough. I was also at the Super Regional in Lexington last year, so got to watch them play Kentucky, and they had a great team, man. I mean, if they pulled away with that game 2, game 3 would have been a lot of fun and very interesting. But yeah, I think they'll continue to reload and put together a good resume.
The Georgia Bulldogs, unreal. I mean, Charlie Condon became what I think is just the 3rd player in college baseball history at the Division I level, at least, to lead the nation in batting average, 433, and home runs with 37. After I think didn't he just redshirted it the previous year.
Yeah, he actually I think he was there as a walk-on, I want to say, on no scholarship initially. So that's just a great story of a dude who just kept his head down and seemed like an easy guy to root for last year. I mean, didn't pump his own tires too much. Seemed like a pretty humble dude who worked his ass off to get in the spot he was in. And yeah, I was glad that I was not playing when I watched him, because he was one of those guys where you watch hit and it just looks like he's playing a video game up there.
Someone else, who just a heck of a coach. He go back, I guess, 15 years now, a little over 15 years. Link Jarrett was the hitting coach for East Carolina, former Florida State shortstop, who is now doing such an excellent job, led that program to Omaha a year ago. And Mike Martin took the Noles to Omaha so many years, but can never win the title. I think at some point, Link Jarrett will probably get one for that Florida State program. And then you also have an in-state program, with the Gators there, as they typically always are.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I mean, Florida State was not an underdog, but they were my maybe unpopular opinion to win it all last year. I mean, everyone was super high on Tennessee. I really thought that, especially since they were matched up with them game 1, I thought they had what it took to win that game and win the whole thing. They had great bats. Their pitching, obviously led by Jamie Arnold, who is back. He'll be their dude this year. We did not get to see Cam Leiter towards the end of the season. He's actually a UCF guy. You may remember him pitching against the Pirates a few times. I'm expecting him to be probably number 2 in their rotation. He's got a live arm, and he's a dude. So I think they're going to be really good again this year.
And then For our viewers who may have missed episode 10, there, the graphic, the right side, that's, of course, the games that East Carolina has against these top 25 opponents. The traveling series against the Tar Heels on the second weekend of the season there at the end of February, and then a game against the Duke Blue Devils, which are ranked 11th. That is on campus in Durham, and then a home and home with the 13th ranked NC State Wolfpack. Folks like, at least at D1 baseball, they like Vandy to bounce back after a very atypical 2024. And then I mentioned the Troy Trojans coming in at 25th. Dallas Baptist, that program's been so consistent. They're 20th. And then UCSB, another program that's, just always seemingly right there, and went an incredible something like 26-4 in league play a year ago.
Yeah, another two that I'm expecting some improvements from, going back to the coaching change topic a little bit, is South Florida. Obviously, us both being American Athletic Conference guys, we know how talented some of those teams were throughout the years. They always have talent. They got Mitch Hanna's coming in from Indiana State to take over. And he was a guy I actually played against him when he was at Indiana State. And one thing I noticed about him is how many JUCO guys that they get on that team. And I just think, obviously, that translates so well to being in that area of the country. You got so many JUCOs in Florida. So if he's able to recruit in there, I think he's going to turn that thing around. And we've obviously seen them in a super in the past few years. So expecting some big things out of them. And then Ohio State as well. It's another school that just has a ton of money to pour into baseball. And they got Justin Hare, who you guys are familiar with. He's done a great job with those Campbell teams, and they've been super competitive and with everyone they played. So I'm excited to see if baseball picks up in Columbus a little bit.
Yeah, definitely no shortage of resources. And with what he did at Campbell, I definitely will be intrigued to see, how it goes in Columbus. And John White chimed in. It's kind of like East Carolina to a lesser degree, but Dallas Baptist is a program that's been in super regionals. Could this potentially be the year that they break through and get to Omaha? And the Pirates, have been right there on the doorstep on multiple occasions, and a bit of the same thing with DBU.
Yeah, I mean, that's a team that I don't know a whole lot about going into this year. I obviously know that they've had great programs, and again, very, very competitive with everyone they played. But I know I mentioned to you earlier, it's fun to look at these preseason rankings. But I mean, as we said, especially now with how much these rosters change, and this was always my perspective as a player too. I was never in the rankings, but you can't read too much into it, right? Like you have no idea how these teams are going to click down the stretch with all the pieces they got. And I know ECU's had some seasons that didn't look very promising in April, and then you show up in May and they're on a 16-game win streak and they're the hottest team in the country. So can't buy into this stuff too much. You just it's a long season. You got a lot of games, and you never know who's going to click down the stretch.
As far as your Bearcats and what they'll be seeing in the new look Big 12, of course, you lose to Texas Longhorns going to the SEC, but then you're picking up a couple of very strong baseball and tradition-rich programs in Arizona and Arizona State. And Arizona State's been a bit down in recent years, but Arizona, they come in at 21st in the preseason rankings.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great conference for baseball. Every weekend's fun to watch as a Bearcats fan, watching them play at TCU and all these places. Was talking to, actually, when I had two of my buddies that are still on the team on the podcast in the fall, it was obviously they're picked last year and finished fifth, and it's their first year. They had a ton of new guys where it's like, why would the standard be anything lower than fifth from here on out? So I'm excited to watch, man. They got Nate Taylor will be their Friday guy. He's a sophomore. He's coming off a big freshman year, so looking forward to seeing him make another jump this sophomore year and watch some good baseball from the Bearcats.
And the final team I wanted to mention was the Stanford Cardinal, along with East Carolina, and one of the more consistent programs over the last 5-6 years, and just hosting regionals year in, year out, and winning 40+ games, and now that they're in the ACC obviously was already right there year in, year out with the SEC, the top 2 leagues in the country for the most part. And now you throw in a program like Stanford. Interesting to see how they handle the travel, and a new look for the Cardinal from a baseball standpoint.
Yeah, and I'm pumped to watch that freshman they brought in from Japan, man. His name is Rintaro Sasaki.
Yes.
I don't know how that process goes down from going to a college from Japan, but I know that was a huge pickup, and he was highly sought after by a lot of teams. He's a big ass dude. I think he's almost like 290 pounds. Freshman, and just absolutely rakes from the left side. So I'm pumped to watch him.
And lastly, we'll close with the Pirates. I don't know how much you've had the chance to dive into ECU just yet, but for our viewers and listeners, we'll be taking a closer look at the Pirates here over the next few days. On Wednesday evening, we'll catch up with Trent Britt of Next Level Training Center. Of course, Trent's a season ticket holder and a longtime follower of the program. He had a son, or has a son, Dalton, who actually played, at Liberty. But he's very closely connected to the Pirate program, and look forward to getting his thoughts on the 2025 club. You lose the likes of Atreya Savage, first round arm. You also lose a weekend starter who would have probably been the Friday guy had he returned, in Zach Root. And then you lose quality options like Danny Bill and Wyatt Lunsford-Sheikman out of the pen, and 6 out of your 9 position players. But one thing is for sure, there's no shortage of talent within the program. It's just a matter of how quickly things will come together. And the Pirates will be tested early and often, and have that weekend series, traveling series, if you will, with the Tar Heels, the number 6 team in the country, on the second weekend of the season. And very interested to see how Cliff Godwin's 11th club in the purple and gold comes together.
Yeah, I have not gotten a ton of time to dive into the roster, but I will say the one thing about ECU is the development. I mean, I played against guys who were maybe the last option out of the bullpen my freshman year, who were some of the best dudes my junior and senior year. And it seems that there's always guys on that team that just continue to develop and get better throughout the years. And just they're not playing as individual stars out there, right? We talked about how they like to play offense and how they play as a team and a disciplined unit, where like you said, there may be some plugins early on to see who fits, but I'm pretty confident that once Coach Godwin sees that lineup he likes and they get hot, I mean, regardless of talent compared to teams that they've had in the past, and I'm not saying they have a shortage, but even if they did, just the way they play as a team and play their game, I mean, they're gonna be able to win a lot of ball games.
Yeah, and of course, that's what here locally, we've heard the interviews, conversations with Coach Godwin, and he and the other coaches, definitely, firmly believe in these guys they've brought in. Obviously, that goes without saying, but just that he said we're really as talented as we've ever been. We just don't have those proven commodities, like a Jacob Jenkins Cowart or like a Atreya Savage, and so many of those household ECU baseball names.
That's right. I mean, Trey Savage was that freshman coming out of the bullpen his freshman year, right? And then he turns into the Friday guy going into the first round. I mean, there's just so many guys that, I mean, Bryson Worrell was not a dude you really circled in the lineup my freshman year, but by my junior year, he was blowing us up. I mean, that's the thing about all these dudes is everyone was once that freshman who know what he knew about, and it just takes some time to prove yourself a little bit. And like you said, they may not have those proven guys coming back into this year, but give it a couple months and they'll be right there.
And Bryson Worrell, great example. He's an Eastern North Carolina kid, not the most developed guy from a baseball standpoint, definitely had his moments, but became more refined as his career went along, and developed into just a remarkable player, making highlight reel catches and then homering several times from each side of the plate on a consistent basis in that 2022 season. And last year he was as high as AAA within the Atlanta Braves organization.
Yeah, I mean, that dude I'd say he beats Caglione in speed, but as far as the biggest, fastest, strongest kid I ever played against, he might be top of the list. I mean, he runs like a deer. He could throw it 100 miles an hour from the outfield, and he'll hit one 450 feet against you. So it was definitely impressive to watch from the dugout or from the field.
Well, JP, really appreciate you being so generous with your time, spending a little over an hour and 15 minutes with us talking college baseball from a variety of angles. And we'll definitely have you back on during the season, probably mid-year, and then as tournament time rolls around, as we get ready for the Road to Omaha and the NCAA regionals and super regionals. But tell folks how they can watch and listen to the podcast and follow you on social media.
Yeah, so we're on Instagram, X, or formerly known as Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. The Instagram is at road.to.omaha.podcast. I'll just give you that one. And there's a link tree in the bio where you can get to everything else. So, again, I appreciate you having me on. This was awesome, and look forward to keeping in touch with you.
And if you struggled to find it, just as JP mentioned, if you just simply search Road to Omaha Podcast or the Road to Omaha Podcast, I found it right away. But definitely give it a listen. Tell folks who your most recent guest was, Indiana Hoosier.
Yeah, so I just had Devin Taylor on. He was a kid I played against in high school, local kid from Cincinnati. Big time bat for the Hoosiers. He's expected to go in the first or second round of the draft here in 2025. So great, humble kid. Pumped to have him on. And then just recorded with AJ Gracia from Duke Blue Devils. He just got rated the number 2 sophomore in all of college baseball. He's a dude. He rakes. And he gave some props when I asked him best atmosphere. He said the Pirates. So make sure you guys go in, tune into that one when it gets released here in the next few days.
Nice. Yeah. Duke was victorious last year at Clark LeClaire, winning that game. I believe it was 4-2. Riley Johnson had a highlight reel Sports Center top 10 catch in the right center gap, but the Blue Devils did prevail. And that's something that, here in recent years that they've done seldomly against the Pirates, but they did get the better of ECU a year ago. And it was pretty remarkable, the string of success that ECU had against Duke. It was just one of those things where the Pirates had their number because, yes, that streak went back a ways, but it also included those years, midweek games against the Blue Devils when they were consistently in super regionals. And what a job Chris Pollard has done there. That administration really needs to step up, and I know they have to a degree, but if their location permits, they really deserve a new ballpark.
Yeah.
From a biased perspective, I don't care so much, but just look at putting on and just being unbiased. he and that staff and what they've accomplished, they definitely deserve a nice on-campus ballpark.
Yeah, they deserve it, man. He's done a great job. They've been really fun to watch the past year or so. And going back to what you were saying earlier, I mean, midweek baseball in North Carolina. It's if you're ever bored during the week, you can find a Tuesday, Wednesday game of great baseball between a battle of some teams in North Carolina. So always good matchups.
Yep, and to your point, with East Carolina having so many losses, I saw something recently. Within North Carolina and South Carolina, it's a publication that covers both states, and the Pirates were ranked 7th just in those two states, which shows you just the quality of baseball to have a program of East Carolina's caliber. That you have 6 programs ranked ahead of ECU, but with what Clemson, South Carolina, and of course NC State, North Carolina, Duke, and everything they return and what they bring to the table, I wasn't shocked, but yeah, there's no shortage of midweek games and weekend series without a 3 or 4 hour radius of travel.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's even gotten better since I left the state of North Carolina. I mean, you just mentioned all of them just last year, and you throw Campbell and UNCW in there too. I mean, obviously when you got not your Friday guy on the mound, things get interesting in midweeks, and you get some high scoring games and some weird games where it's kind of a toss up at times. So always great matchups down there.
Definitely. Well, again, really appreciate the time and you being so generous, and we look forward to catching up with you down the road. Pirate Nation, that is JP Sponseller, former Cincinnati Bearcat, and the host of the Road to Omaha Podcast. Definitely go and subscribe, like, follow, all those things, and he'll be putting out some excellent content moving throughout the college baseball season. But we appreciate everyone tuning in to Jungle Tales and our 11th episode. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on social media. We can be found at Jungle Tales Pod. That's on IG and X, which is also formerly Twitter. And then on Facebook and YouTube, we can be found by searching Jungle Tales, a Pirate Baseball podcast. But until next time, we appreciate you tuning in. And as always, go Pirates.